Every now and then, a group of people attempt to rethink the very form of the automobile. Think cars like the Volkswagen Beetle, the front-wheel drive Mini Cooper, SUVs, hatchbacks, trucks. These kinds of vehicles, they didn't always exist, and they came to be for a reason. They served a purpose. They filled a need for prospective buyers. They were really answers to questions, like why can't we have a vehicle capable of pulling stumps out of the ground? Or why can't we have a car that is tiny on the outside but big on the inside? You know, like that tent in Harry Potter 4. But what if I told you that the single greatest form of the car, of the vehicle, or automobile as we know it, is actually something we killed? Of course I'm talking about the station wagon. This one's been a long time coming, guys. Many of you have requested this video, so let's dive in. Just try not to get too bogged down by all of the wood trim and 8-track players. If you guys love station wagons and you're interested in diving deeper into the history of station wagons, check out this awesome source for this video, which is Byron Olson's book, aptly named Station Wagons. It is fantastic, and I'll link it below. In the decade between World War I and the Great Depression, the automobile transitioned from what Byron Olson calls a toy for the rich to a necessity for many. This meant that the very form of the car was changing to meet various people's needs. No longer was it good enough for the car to simply be a carriage finding its horsepower from an engine instead of, well, a horse. From the farm to the city, everyone wanted a car, but even as the car grew in popularity, there was a void that needed to be filled, especially in the city. If you wanted to travel from city to city or just into the city, you would take a train. The highway system as we know it didn't exist at this time, but once you were in the city from the train, there was no Turo or Uber. The rich would take a taxi, which, in and of itself was a new concept, but many couldn't afford this. So if you were staying at a hotel, how would you get from the train station to the hotel? Well, the answer was a station wagon. A car meant to haul you and your 14 kids and all your luggage from the station to the hotel. These were sort of like ferry cars. They were in essence early trucks with custom toppers, often made of wood, as it was simple to work with and customize. This specific transportation need would give rise to an entire industry of coach building. By the time companies would get around to building their own fully developed station wagons, many of the design cues were already there from these early days. Rows of bench seats and even wood accents really harkened back to this early time. In 1929, everything would change though when Ford would set out to make their own station wagon. Built on the Model A chassis, this 4-door bare-bones wagon proved popular and could have created the need for other manufacturers to jump in if it weren't for the Great Depression. And so it really wouldn't be until 1933 that other companies like Dodge and Plymouth would begin contracting out wagon building for their lineup. Slowly, the station wagon would take a more useful shape. The wood bodies became more stylized, roll-up windows and more aerodynamic bodies took the place of just this primitive box thrown on a truck. Perhaps the single most important station wagon, though, of this time was Chevy's take on the form known as the carryall. With plenty of passenger space, enough room for 8 folk, windows all around, removable seats, this vehicle would become the Suburban, and in many ways it would change the automotive landscape forever as it paved the way for SUVs and station wagons going forward. Through the 1930s, we really saw the station wagon take shape as more than just a utilitarian vehicle. They became stylish with unique wood accents and more refined interiors. Through the 40s, the purpose of the station wagon, though, would change quite a bit. As outdoor recreation became popular, I realize this sounds silly, but it is true that camping and off-roading and just long-distance road tripping, these things really became a thing at this point. Anyways, being just able to pack up the whole family along with a bunch of junk became a necessity for many, and the station wagon was the vehicle of choice for these activities. From the luxurious Buick estate wagon to the more affordable and rugged Willys wagon, the vehicle made for hauling changed and morphed into something quite different from those original wagons. Willys wagons weren't built of wood, for example, which was quite revolutionary. During the 40s, owners really actually did get sick of the upkeep necessary for all these wood bodies. You had to varnish these things regularly, and so the industry shifted, with wood either disappearing or becoming more of an accent. I think Plymouth's pioneering 1950 wagon model in all steel is a good example. The woodish origins of the wagon would stick around well into even the 90s, but as we'll see, it would move from function to fashion really as wood became more of a trim. Still, at this point in the 50s, the station wagon was a pretty niche option for most. The 1950s would really prove to be the decade where the station wagon would come into its own and sort of go fully mainstream and give rise to some of the greatest cars of all time. Two things really came together in the 50s, well, three things. The first is money. Times were good in America, families had money, businesses were thriving, cars became more and more luxurious, and so did station wagons. The second thing, though, is highways. Eisenhower's interstate program would make long-distance traveling significantly more accessible. Oh, and the third thing, station wagons got folding rear seats, and yuppies went wild for it. And with their growing popularity, they became more stylish, luxurious, comfortable, and just more usable. One of the most outlandish, flamboyant station wagons of the 50s was Mercury's Colony Park. Can I just say that we've lost the art of naming vehicles? Colony Park, what a fantastic name that really does capture the spirit of the vehicle, and it just makes me want to buy it. Now we get names like the Venue or the Mach-E. Anyways, by the 1950s, virtually every American manufacturer, and even some non-American ones, were making wagons. Think the Volvo Duet or the Morris Minor Traveler, but I'll be honest, nobody was doing it quite like the Americans. Ford was still selling the most, but competition was stiff, and there was the Nomad, the classic car my son hopes to own someday. Yeah, he needs to get a job. With an all-new body paired to the marvelous new small block V8, this car was fantastic, with a unique greenhouse glass setup that gave the car a really open feel and a distinct look, from small to large to extra large, expensive and luxurious to simple and affordable. As the 60s got underway, there were now station wagons for virtually everyone. The 60s in many ways represented the high water mark, at least for the station wagon in North America. Not just in terms of sales, but really its place in the American automotive market and in culture as a whole. As suburban life boomed, the station wagon became the quintessential family car, a symbol of practicality and middle-class success. Automakers competed fiercely in this space, introducing larger, more luxurious, and more innovative station wagons. By the 60s, American wagons had become massive. Full-size models like the Chevrolet Kingswood or the Ford Country Squire or the Chrysler Town & Country, they were offered with seating of up to 9 passengers and big cavernous cargo areas. Powered by increasingly large V8 engines, these wagons were capable of hauling families, camping gear, and even boats with ease. Station wagons adopted the same flamboyant styling as sedans, with lots of chrome accents and of course wood grain paneling, and, some jet age influences. The Ford Country Squire popularized simulated wood grain siding, giving the wagon a sort of pseudo-rustic charm that really became iconic, and would, become a symbol of luxury. The 1960s brought practical innovations like the magic door gate introduced by Ford in '66, which allowed the tailgate to open both downwards and sideways. While full-size wagons dominated, there were also smaller models, compact wagons like the Chevrolet Corvair Lakewood and the Rambler American. They appealed to budget-conscious buyers, and the wagon's appeal really did just kind of broaden across demographics through the 60s. In many ways, the station wagon's success in the 50s and 60s was tied directly to that era's lifestyle. Suburbia demanded a vehicle that could ferry multiple kids, could handle road trips, and could carry groceries, all while looking stylish parked in your driveway. In a time before SUVs and minivans, the station wagon was really the perfect solution. Despite the 70s starting strong, though, for the station wagon, new pressures began to emerge that would really signal the beginning of the end. The Volvo 240 estate, external factors really began chipping away at the station wagon's dominance. Of course, there's the oil crisis in '73, which caused gasoline prices to skyrocket, leaving consumers wary of the fuel-guzzling V8 engines that did power most wagons. Buyers began to explore more fuel-efficient options, often turning to compact cars or smaller wagons imported from Europe and Japan. Government-mandated safety and emission standards began really reshaping all of automotive design. Traditional station wagons, especially the large American models, they struggled to adapt while maintaining, any level of performance. For example, bulky 5-mile-per-hour bumpers added weight and impacted the overall look. The appeal of the station wagon was waning, and other options were starting to take its place for buyers, besides just, smaller wagons provided by foreign manufacturers. Hatchbacks, for example, offered wagon-like practicality in a smaller, more efficient package. Models like the Volkswagen Rabbit and the Datsun 510 wagon introduced American buyers to compact utility, but with a modern flair. If the 1970s weakened the station wagon, the 1980s in some ways delivered a near fatal blow, at least to the American manufacturers making station wagons, with the invention of the minivan. Chrysler's Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, these were introduced in '84 and they redefined family transportation. Perhaps the biggest appeal of the minivan over the station wagon was its height. Minivans allowed far more interior space without the need for this large footprint. Sliding doors made entry and exit easier, especially in tight parking spots. Most minivans were built on front-wheel drive platforms with, smaller, more efficient engines, and this gave them an edge in fuel economy over these bulky, giant rear-wheel drive wagons. Also, there's no denying that the station wagon, to many, was just beginning to feel outdated. Minivans were marketed as modern and innovative, and they became the new status symbol for families, much like the SUV is today. It's not always about practicality. It's more about what the neighbors think. Even the other day, I was picking up a chair in my van and I was talking to these people who were selling it. And, they had a big SUV and she was admitting like a minivan is better in so many ways for a family than an SUV. And she just said, yeah, we just did the SUV thing because that's what everyone does. I don't really understand that, but whatever. Despite the minivan's rise, some wagons tried to stay relevant. Volvo, for instance, continued to innovate with models like the 240 and 740. These were models that prioritized safety and practicality. Subaru's four-wheel drive wagons sort of gained a niche following, especially in rural and snowy areas, and they kind of laid the groundwork for the crossover revolution. If the 1980s was the era of the minivan, then the 90s was the era of the meteoric rise of the SUV. The Ford Explorer, introduced in '91, and the Jeep Cherokee. These tapped into a rugged, outdoorsy image that appealed to both families and individuals, and so station wagons were further relegated to a similar niche status that they had at their inception. And in many ways, the people who got station wagons were just kind of hippies who needed a little space. Sometimes hippies know what's up, though. SUVs were marketed as adventurous and capable. They appealed to customers who wanted a vehicle that could handle off-road trails, even if most would never leave pavement. In contrast, wagons were still tied to the staid image of suburban life. The elevated seating position of SUVs provided, in many people's mind, better visibility and a sense of safety, even if none of that's really accurate. And this did appeal to drivers. SUVs featured four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, making them more versatile than wagons in snow and rough terrain. By the 2000s, the station wagon was all but extinct in North America. Crossovers, which combined the practicality of wagons with the image of an SUV, in many ways filled that void. Models like the Toyota RAV4 and Honda CR-V became the new family favorites. And of course, large, more luxury-oriented SUVs would all but kill the station wagon. Now, in Europe, station wagons like the Audi A4 Avant or the BMW 3 Series Touring, and of course the Volvo V70, these models did remain pretty popular. In many ways, that's a geographical thing, though. Narrower streets make it tough for SUVs to work in some of these countries. Even in the US, luxury brands kept the wagon alive in niche markets with models like the Mercedes-Benz E-Class wagon and the Subaru Outback that did kind of straddle the line between wagon and crossover. I think it's easy to assume that the station wagon died simply because better alternatives came to exist, and in some ways that is the case, especially with minivans. But today, large four-wheel drive SUVs don't actually offer much more practicality than a station wagon, even if you do want to take your family camping. How often is there really a need for this massive overlanding vehicle when you're just driving on paved roads to a campsite? Very few SUVs are used to their full capacity, and station wagons really could make sense for many in suburbia, and I think would be better, just for our cities, over these massive gas-guzzling, impractical SUVs. Today, the station wagon survives as a niche product, celebrated by enthusiasts for its blend of utility and driving dynamics. Models like the Audi RS6 Avant and the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo prove that wagons can still be cool and useful, but they do remain a far cry from the family haulers of the 60s. I really believe the wagon's decline was less about its flaws and more about changing consumer priorities. This journey from dominance to near extinction, it reflects not just automotive trends, but the evolution of culture itself. In his book on the station wagon, Byron Olson takes a different outlook to the decline of the station wagon. He argues that the rise of the minivan, and especially the SUV, doesn't so much mark the death of the station wagon, but rather an evolution. He says it doesn't take a genius to tell at a glance that all SUVs are really station wagon bodies mounted up on four-wheel drive truck chassis with bigger tires and higher road clearance. So the station wagon hasn't really gone away, instead it's been transformed into a more commodious family vehicle in the form of the minivan or in the form of the SUV, a go-anywhere vehicle with less emphasis on cargo capacity than upon mobility off-road. Now, of course, to some extent, he is right. There is no modern SUV without the station wagon, but are these really station wagons today? SUVs are built on truck platforms, and SUVs already existed alongside station wagons through the 70s and 80s. They're different things. They really are not cars, they're trucks. And what makes station wagons so great is that they truly are cars. And this idea of combining the two worlds, these two kinds of vehicles, into what we have with SUVs, it isn't as good of an idea as we all think. Car platforms have significant advantages for suburban use over truck platforms. Of course, one of them is that today modern cars have such smaller footprints, better visibility, better gas mileage, and better safety standards. Very few SUV users do any off-roading. Why can't we just keep the SUV and the sedan separate? And let's just see how good we could make a station wagon today. Station wagons can be safer because they aren't classified as large trucks, so they would have to meet the higher safety standards of sedans, and they would be much less prone to rollover. They would have more storage. They'd be easier to get in and out of for families. I'll admit it, the minivan is probably the GOAT family vehicle, but that's another video that's coming hopefully soon. But simply put, though there were quite a few contributing factors to the decline of the station wagon, we are the ones who killed this vehicle. We killed it when we let manufacturers convince us that we needed something more when we really don't, whether that's four-wheel drive or, just styling, or this idea that we need a gigantic vehicle, or we need something that looks aggressive. All that families have ever needed is a nice big station wagon, because the goal hasn't changed from the beginning. It is still the ultimate vehicle for hauling a bunch of stuff and a bunch of people at the same time. Regardless, there are some automakers that are keen on bringing back the station wagon for the modern world, and they're taking a page out of the SUV playbook. Many station wagons are now marketed as rugged, off-road ready vehicles. These so-called soft roaders, as people call them, they combine wagon practicality with SUV aesthetics and capabilities. Of course, there's the Subaru Outback, perhaps the most iconic adventure wagon. The Outback has maintained a strong presence in the US market. Audi offers quite a few station wagons, the A4 and A6 all-road models. They kind of have an SUV feel with extra ground clearance and, the body shape. There's also EV platforms that really do work well for station wagons because there's just so much extra space for the batteries without compromising interior room. Examples like the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo and the Audi A6 Avant e-tron. Also the Volvo V60 Recharge, which is a hybrid. But I'll admit that these haven't really caught on in the States the way that wagons originally did. While the station wagon declined in popularity in North America, they have remained popular in Europe. Companies like BMW and Mercedes-Benz and Volvo, they continue to make nice station wagons for European customers, and some of these models find their way to the US as niche imports. The BMW 3 Series Touring and the Mercedes-Benz E-Class wagons are good examples. These are high-performance wagons that are becoming popular, especially among people who want practicality, but they want fast, powerful cars that handle really nice. Oh, and I have to mention a car that Noah Patch 1483 is apparently very excited about, which is the Kia K4 wagon. Not sure I can trust a company that made a minivan that looks like an SUV, but we'll see. No, it actually does look really cool, so shout out to him for requesting this video. As you can see, it's mostly European manufacturers that are leading the resurgence of station wagons, and I think what we need at this point is a company like Ford to do what they did with the Bronco and make a retro station wagon. Let's say they could bring back the Country Squire, for example. Even if this did happen, it's unlikely that wagons will ever reach the popularity that they had in the mid-20th century. And so for now, if you want a cool station wagon, There's a few options from European companies, or you could get a cool vintage one, or you could get, a nice Japanese one from, say, the 80s or 90s. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you like these videos, and we'll see you in the next one. Drive safe.